We continue now at the top of Daf Kufay and Beis of Aleph and Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 172a. The Gemara is discussing the practice nowadays of writing documents that are post-dated. And the Gemara says, V'ha'idna, but nowadays, the lo kavdin hachi, we don't take any of the precautions that we just mentioned on the previous Amud. And so why is it that we don't take those precautions? And the Rashbam explains, V'ha'idna lo avdin hachi, we don't do this nowadays. Ela kasvinan shtar me'ucher stam. And nowadays, we just write a post-dated document. De lo ksiv ichrenu v'chasvenu. It doesn't say on it that it was post-dated. It's not clear that it was post-dated. V'chasvinan tavra alayu b'shas piron. And we also write a receipt. Let's say part of it is paid up, for example. The chasvinan zman b'shover, and we write a date in that receipt. V'lo kasvinan leistam, and we don't write it without a date. And so therefore, you have this issue. Apparently, we're not concerned with the problem that Rabbi Yossi raised. And again, the problem is that if the date on the shover is earlier than the date on the document because it was post-dated, but we don't know that it was post-dated, so now the malva will be able to take out the document and collect, and the receipt will not help the lova because the date on the receipt is earlier than the date on the document. And the Gemara continues, Amar Le, he said back to him, again there were two versions, this is either Rav Kahana talking or Rav Ashi talking, he said, Rabbanan tikune takini, the Rabbanan, they made this takana in order to prevent this problem, meaning to say the person should either not date the shover, or the person should write a note on the document saying that it is mu'ucher, that it's post-dated. Man de avid, whoever does what the Rabbanan say, so then they do it and it'll be successful. Man de lo avid, let's say somebody doesn't take this precaution, iyuhu da'afsid anafshi, so he is lost out for himself, because again, you could run into this problem where the date on the receipt is earlier than the date on the document. And the Gemara continues, Amar Luhu Rabba Bar Rav Shila Lahanu Kasvei Shtara Akniyosa. Rabba Bar Rav Shila said to those who write documents that are used for acquiring, this is talking about a situation where the document is written a little later than the acquisition actually happened. So he said to them as follows, Ki Kasvisu Shtara Akniyosa, when you write these documents of acquisition, Iyadisu Yoma de Kanisu Be, if you know the day that the acquisition was made, Kasvu, you should write that date into the document. Vilo, but if you don't know the exact date, so don't do an estimation, rather Kasvu you should write the date that you're actually writing the document, because we don't want it to look like the document is saying a lie. And the Gemara continues, Amar Lahu Rav L'Safrei, Rav said to his scribe, V'chein Amar Lahu Rav Huna L'Safrei, and similarly, Rav Huna said to his scribe, Ki kaimisu b'shilei, when you're in Shilei, kasu b'shilei, so when you write up the document, you should write the location where you are writing up the document, write Shilei. V'afagav d'mesiran l'chumili b'hine, even though the matter actually happened, let's say the transaction, it actually occurred in Hine. And similarly, Ki kaimisu b'hine, if you're in Hine, kasu b'hine, you should write Hine in the as far as the location that you're writing into the document. V'afagav d'mesiran l'chumili b'shilei, even though the matter actually occurred in Shilei, don't write the area where the transaction happened, rather write the area where you are writing the document. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Haiman denokit shtora bar mea zuzeh, if somebody has a document and it says that he's entitled to collect 100 zuz, v'yamar, and the lender, this person who has the document, he says, Shavya nehile trei b'nei chamshin, I'd rather you convert this document from one document that collects 100 zuz, let's have two documents, each one collects 50, the idea is that way he can collect part of the debt, and he'll still have the other document with him to collect the remainder. So lo mashvinan lahu, we don't do that, we don't turn the document, which was 100 zuz, into two documents of 50 zuz each. And the Gemara says, my time, what's the reason for this? Avdu Rabbanan Milsa, the Nichalei Lamalva, V'Nichalei Lalova. The Rabbanan wanted to institute something that was beneficial both for the lender and the borrower. And if you keep it as a note of 100, that's beneficial for both parties. Nichalei Lamalva Kadesha Yachav Lafaro, it's good for the Malva, for the lender, because that enables him to coerce the borrower to pay him back. V'Nichalei Lova, and it's also good for the borrower, Ki Hechi Denifkam Shtari, that way when he pays part of it, it actually lessens the power of the shtar. And the Rashbam explains, Haiman denoket malve denoket shtar milve bar mea zuzeh. Again, a lender has a document that says he's entitled to collect 100 zuz. V'yamar lam, he says to them, kisvuli trei b'nei chamishim, he says instead let's write two documents, 50 each. Shekashe yifra li halo v'chamishim zuzeh, that way when the borrower pays me 50, ekra shtara shel chamishim, I'll be able to tear up the document that was collecting 50. V'lo yet tzarech lichtov shover, we won't have to write any kind of receipt. Lo kasvinan shel shelo midas halov, which he can't write without the consent of the borrower. So that's why he wanted 2 notes of 50. My time, what's the reason? The Rabbanan instituted that you shouldn't change the shtar from what it was, because it's actually beneficial for both parties. And why is it beneficial? Number one, it's beneficial for the lender, that way he can coerce the borrower to pay back, meaning if the borrower, let's say, pays up half of the debt, now the lender has leverage to get him to pay the rest. Because the borrower will be afraid he might lose the receipt. Then the lender will claim everything. So that's a benefit to the malve, but it's also a benefit to the lova, because the shtar of the malve actually is not as strong anymore. Meaning when he does pay part of the loan, when he pays the 50 zuz, it turns out that now the document that's in the possession of the lender is pogum. It's not as strong. We learned in the Mishnah, let's say you have a situation of a ksuba that is considered pogum. Lo sifra ela b'shvua. The halach is she can only collect with such a ksuba if there's an oath. V'hu adin l'chol ashtaros. That's true when it comes to all documents. Kenamrina b'Meseches shvuos, like we say in Meseches shvuos, and therefore there is a benefit to the lova as well. And the Gemara now continues along the same lines with the reverse ruling. V'yamar Rav, and Rava says, let's say a person has 2 documents, 2 notes, and each one is 50. V'yamar, and he says, he wants to convert it into 1 note that collects 100. We don't do that either. Lo mashvinale, we don't do that for him, because of Rabbanan milsa denichale lamalva v'nichale lalova. Because again, the Rabbanan did something. They made a takana that's beneficial both for the lender and the borrower. Again, this is in the reverse fashion. Nichale lamalva. In this case, it's good for the lender. If he has 2 documents, so now that 50 document, let's say he collects with 1, tears it up, now he's got 1 remaining to collect 50 with, so that shtar will not be considered pogum, so that's good for the lender. But it's also good for the borrower, because now he doesn't have a way of coercing him to pay, in the sense, again, that if he paid part of it and all he has is this receipt, the lova is going to want to pay it right away if the malva is holding a note of 100, but if it's a note of 50, that's less of a coercion of the borrower. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravashi says, if somebody has a document, he's a lender, he has a document that can collect 100 zuz, and he says, Shavuni nihili chad bar chamshin, convert this document from 100 to 50, because he's actually already paid me 50. Lo mashvinale, that we don't do for him. Why not? My time, because we say as follows, my time, what's the reason we don't convert it to 50? That seems to be completely to the benefit of the borrower. And the Gemara explains, Zamrinan, because we say, Hai mifra pari, what actually happened is, maybe the borrower paid up the entire thing, he paid all 100. V'yamar le havli shtaroi, and the borrower said to the lender, give me back my shtar, I paid everything off. V'yamar le, and then the lender said to the borrower, irchas li, I actually lost the note. So v'chasav le tavra, so instead he wrote from a receipt that he paid off the 100, and now if he's going to exchange the 100 for a document that says that he's owed 50, umapik le hai, v'yamar le hai achrinahu, now he's going to take out this new document, which entitles him to collect 50, and when the borrower takes out a receipt to prove he paid, but the receipt says he paid 100, and so therefore the lender will be able to say, that was a different debt that you paid me. You actually owe me 50, and we're concerned for that, and that's why we will not convert the note of 100 to a note of 50. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Shnei Achin, if there are 2 brothers, Echad Ani ve'Echad Asher, one of the brothers is poor, and one of them is wealthy, and their father leaves them over a bathhouse and an olive press. So the Mishnah says, Ason l'schar, if the bathhouse and the olive press, if those were used for profit, meaning they were rented out in general while the father was alive, so then haschar le'emsa, so then they can continue to be rented out by the brothers, and whatever profit they make, that they're going to split. However, Ason la'atzmo, however, let's say the father used it for himself, it was for private use, and it really is only useful to somebody who is wealthy, who has a lot of servants, or somebody who has a lot of olives for the olive press. So now the question is, what do you do with this merchatz and this beis abad? So hareha asher omer la'ani. So in this situation, the wealthy brother can say to the poor brother, "Kach lecha avodim v'yirchatzu b'merchatz." Buy for yourself slaves, and they'll be able to wash in the bathhouse also. Kach lecha zeisim uva v'asa b'beis avad. Buy for yourself olives, and then you can use the olive press. In other words, even though the poor brother can do nothing with it, the poor brother cannot force the wealthier brother to rent these out for profit. If they were used privately before, they can continue to be used privately now. And the Mishnah continues, Shnayim shahayu be'ir achas. Let's say you have two people in one city, Shem Echad Yosef ben Shimon, Shem Echad Yosef ben Shimon, and both of them have the same name. One of them is named Yosef ben Shimon, the other one is also named Yosef ben Shimon. Ein Yechol Lahotzi Shtar Chov Zal Zeh, so they can't take out a Shtar Chov one against the other. Let's say one Yosef ben Shimon takes out a shtar and says to the other one, you owe me money. That will not be effective because that other one can say, really, I'm the lender and you're the borrower, and that's why you have the shtar, because you already paid me back. It's not that I owe you money, it's that you owed me money. And similarly, the Mishnah says, V'lo acher yachol lahotzi alehen shtar chov, someone else cannot take out a shtar chov against them, because each one can say, I'm not the Yosef ben Shimon that owes you money. Nimso le'echad bein shtarosav, shtaro shal Yosef ben Shimon parua. Let's say a person finds among his shtaros, among his documents, it's found that it says the shtar of Yosef ben Shimon is paid. Essentially, a receipt is found that says that Yosef ben Shimon, he paid off his debt. So shtaros shnehen pruin, you have to consider the documents of both of them, they're considered to be paid off, meaning that receipt is going to be effective for both Yosef ben Shimons. And the Mishnah continues, Ketzad Yasu. Now, what should you do in this situation? What if you do have two Yosef ben Shimons in one city? How do you solve the problem? The answer is Yeshaleshu. You should, when you make a document, when you write up a document, you should go back a third generation. That way it's clear which Yosef ben Shimon you're talking about. Vim hayu mishulashin, let's say if you go back a third generation also, it's the same name. Let's say it's Yosef ben Shimon ben Ruvain. They both have the same name, even going back a third generation. So yichtavu siman, so then write some other kind of siman, some physical characteristic that can identify this Yosef ben Shimon and distinguish him from the other. Vim hayu misumanim, now if they both have the same simanim, they both look alike. So yichtavu kohen, so the Mishnah says, let's say one of them is a kohen, write that he is a kohen. And the Gemara says, there was a shtar, a document that found its way to the court of Rav Huna, to have a ksiv bein, and it was written in the document, Ani ploni bar ploni, I so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, so it identified the borrower, Lavisi manim imcha, I borrowed a money from you. It didn't identify the lender, it just said from you, and the person holding the document, he said he was the lender, he's the one that's owed the money, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Beis Amid Beis.